اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وعلى أهل بيت somebody think okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Is my sound coming through clearly?
Does it say start streaming?
I clicked start streaming.
Just give me one moment. Okay, so you're live now. You're
Okay.
live now.
Okay.
Okay.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, so it looks like everything is working fine now. We'll just jump right back into it. I wanted to start off with making sure that we understand the proper definition of racism. Actually, one of the popular dictionaries, I believe it was Webster, decided that what was in their book currently as racism needs to be redefined. Part of the way that racism, what is defined as racism, constitutes that there has to be a system which oppresses another people, and via that oppression, there's discrimination by race, which constitutes racism. And so racism doesn't just mean, for example, somebody from one race doesn't like someone from another race. They dislike them, or they're, mean to them, or they, mistreat them. This has to do with understanding that there's a system here. This system allows for one race to have preference over another race, like the apartheid system in South Africa, or really we could say that the apartheid system which exists in Israel as well. And so with that in mind, that helps to put in perspective why, especially for African Americans, there has been so much racism, and they have been victims so much of systematic injustice. Right now, these topics are trending, and it's very popular. You see corporations with Black Lives Matter hashtag and advertisements and things like that. You're seeing people who maybe in the past, like the NFL, were really in opposition of people like Colin Kaepernick, were standing up or metaphorically and kneeling to protest these injustices and police brutality. We're seeing that a lot of people are now coming to the forefront, expressing solidarity with those who have been, for a very long time, victims of police brutality and victims of racism at large. In the Muslim community, even some places, this conversation has been had and is very much long overdue. And I hope that this becomes something where we're not focused on the trend, but we're focused on the reality, the problem that exists, and the long-term solutions. You know, when something is systematically wrong, fixing something on the surface is certainly not going to repair the problem. When the system like this can exist and people can be unaware that there's such a degree of injustice, then we can't expect that overnight, you know, these things are going to go away, things are going to change. There's a lot of education that needs to happen in order for people to really understand what's going on. I have a couple of videos of recommended readings. I encourage you to check that out to see how you can educate yourself, educate friends, family, those around you. Malcolm X said that racism is a cancer, malignant cancer. He said that the solution is Islam. So if we think about and understand that the solution to the racial injustices that we see is Islam, then who has to be the practitioners to carry out that solution? That means Muslims, right? Unless we're not ready to do that. And obviously, there's no flaw in Islam. If there's any flaws, those flaws are our own. Those are our shortcomings as Muslims, and not fully implementing Islam in our lives. We have to understand that in order for us to be practitioners to fix the problems, we have to be practitioners of Islam in our day-to-day lives. Let's look at the landscape of the Muslim community. Okay? In particular, I would say even the Shia community. Whenever people want to identify a center, a masjid, establishment, how do they recognize it? That's a center that does really good things? No. That's the Lebanese center. That's the Iraqi center. That's the Iranian center. Right? That's the Indo-Pak center. This is how we identify. This is our main way of identifying. And when that becomes so much of a focal point, not that that is inherently wrong, but when that becomes the focal point and the source of the main idea and source of our identity, then Islam takes a backseat. Then my identity as a Muslim becomes secondary. I've heard people say that, you know, if I'm from such and such a country and I'm that first before I'm Muslim. I don't want to say which country give it a bad rep. But they said clearly, my culture comes first, my nationality comes first, Islam takes a backseat. This is a mentality that is a problem. As long as this mentality exists, what's going to continue to happen? Well, Muslims will feel that I don't have any stake in lives of African Americans. What's that have to do with me? I'm from India. I'm from Iran. I'm from Iraq. I'm from wherever. And there's no need to see a connection. The beautiful thing about Islam, in Islam lies that solution. Allah created this religion in a way that it can be a solution until the end of time. Where people have been trying to, so one is trying to seek preference over another one since the beginning of time. And that tradition of shaitan is a tradition that many human beings follow. The sunnah of shaitan, Is that what we're down with now? Really? So we see too, we have to take care of our own, and I am better than this person. I am better than that group, or these groups, or multiple groups. And by virtue of that, we get more and more disconnected. To the point where we don't really see the need to see outside of our little bubble. We don't see the need to connect with people who don't speak the same language or are not from the same country, for example. We see little importance. Now, let's just say hypothetically for a minute, let's dream a little bit about the possibility. When someone is oppressed, understanding that Muslims are the people, the guardians of justice, the supporters of the mazloom. Where are the mazloomeen? We're their supporters there, or should be. We just spent the whole month of Ramadan fasting. Imam Hassan al-Askari says that one of the purposes of fasting is what? To understand what it is to not have. That if we lose that empathy and that humanity, let's regenerate that. That's what part of the goal of the month of Ramadan. In that month of Ramadan, we commemorated the martyrdom of Ali ibn Abi Talib, peace be upon him. Hopefully we paid attention to his advice that when he was struck with that poisonous sword, that blow, that fatal blow, he gave some advice. And one of the things that he advised was to stand against the zalim. Stand with and support the mazloom. So this is part of the identity, the DNA of a Muslim. Where's injustice? I'm ready to be against that. I'm ready to eradicate it. I'm supporting wherever there's injustice. I'm supporting those who are mazloom. I'm not shy about standing up to the bully. I'm standing against the zalim. Now, if we dream for a minute that even just in North America, if all of the Muslims, all of the people who love Amir al-Mu'mineen, who at least in theory adhere to these words and this advice, let's say that all of these people, every single one, is a practitioner of Islam and standing against injustice. If they all come together, what is the power and the strength of that? Or they don't come together, and each person is in their isolated section. We have to understand that there is strength and the power of Islam is in us coming together. How do we do that? We recognize that our main and most important identity is our identity as a Muslim. That it's Islam that connects us. It is Islam that will bring us together with other mu'mineen. It's Islam that removes those filters and barriers. It's Islam that removes the barriers of a person's color, a person's race, a person's nationality, a person's ethnicity, a person's whether they are Sayyid or not. It's Islam that gave us all of this preference to atqakum. Who's the most God conscious and the most God wearing? If that becomes the thing which is connecting us, if that becomes the connecting piece, then we become connected to so many. If my brother is someone who says, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, if my bond is based on Islam, then how big is my family? Then it doesn't become, unfortunately, there's this, some of you may be familiar with the idea of what deficit thinking is, or a deficit narrative. Like when we look at something and we really just focus on as if it's something deficient. Inherently, there's something wrong with this. That's how a lot of people, unfortunately, even within our communities, are looking at the situation of African Americans, George Floyd. They're focusing on some kind of deficit narrative. As a result of that, they're not able to follow that advice of the Imam, stand with the oppressed. As a result of that, and not having that identity and bond of a Muslim, they're not able to connect with other Muslims. What's some of the responses that have been unfortunate that you hear? Someone was murdered in a fashion that hopefully we haven't seen here before. Now everything's caught on camera. We're seeing and witnessing things. Those with the badge to protect and serve are murdering black people on the streets. You have to tell me what goes through the mind of a person. After so many seconds, you hear someone pleading for their life. Think about this. What goes through the heart of a person when someone's begging and pleading? You have power over them and you oppress them. You cut off their airwaves. They're dying and you're listening to them die. What goes through the mind of a person at that moment? That they could be so indifferent that you can count. I'd love for everyone to take 7 minutes, 8 minutes, or 9 minutes, whatever the exact amount of time it was that the officer knelt on George Floyd's neck, causing him to die. Sit quiet for 8 minutes and it feels like eternity. It feels like a very long time. And during this whole time, there wasn't an ounce of anything in this person's conscience that said, maybe I should stop, even for a minute. Maybe I should get up and just make sure he's not dead, that I'm not a murderer. When you think about the psyche of someone in that state, I want you to remember that that person in that moment was a zalim. He was an oppressor. But I also want you to think about the people who stood there and were witnesses. You know, like in high school when, or even middle school, when there's a fight and people gather around in the circle and yell, fight, fight. Everybody comes to watch, and they're witnessing. Maybe someone's a bully and they're beating someone up. Maybe it's not a fair fight, but they'll watch it. It's entertaining. That's a sickness. When that's the level and the degree of what we need to be entertained. So the reason why I emphasize this and why I'm painting this picture again of what happened, because there were people who they said, we're people of authority, justice, other officers, and they stood there. In fact, they said, we're going to make sure that whatever is happening continues to happen. And you look on their faces, it's like they don't even care. How does a person get to that point? Why am I stressing and emphasizing this? We are the Muslims. If we are following what Amir al-Mu'mineen said, كُنَ لِلظَّالِمِ خَصْمًا وَلِلْمَظْلُومِ عَوْنًا, and we are the people who are in opposition of oppression and oppressors and standing with the oppressed, we can't be indifferent. It is absolutely not an option. It's not a choice. If I'm not ready to stand against dhulm like this, then I need to turn in my Muslim card. It's getting revoked. Completely unacceptable for me to be indifferent. Muharram's coming up. And Muharram, people will weep. They'll remember Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. They'll remember the great tragedy in Karbala. And what that looked like. I want you to connect the dots. Because there were people who were ummata qatalat, who murdered Imam Hussein, peace be upon him, and his companions. These people are cursed. And then there were people who stood by and did nothing. Hal min nasirin yansuruni. They were not answering the call. They did nothing. And these people are also cursed. Sama'at wa radiyat bih. They heard and they did nothing. They were okay with what happened. Also not ready to be a Muslim, as Imam Ali defined, and stand against that injustice. And so because of that, they become a group that is accursed in history. So it's very easy to see the dhulm and oppression of the officer who knelt and murdered George Floyd. It's also important for us to see the oppressors who are standing around watching. Because you need a cold heart to watch that level of abuse, the process of murder take place, and still feel no need to even raise your voice. So, let's go back to what I mentioned earlier. Right now, it's really cool to be down with social justice. That's what it is. You know, it's hashtag everywhere. And if you're not doing that, then that would seem problematic from a social standpoint right now. But let's talk about later. Let's talk about not right now. we is this a one-off? We stand against oppression in the moment. We do something in the moment. We have heightened voices in the moment. We write poetry in the moment. We post on social media in the moment. But we're not ready to be a part of the movement. We're not ready to make our commitment continue and be maintained with longevity. And what about tomorrow? The same way that we're looking at that incident in Karbala and the people who were silent, we can't be indifferent to the reality that every place is where? Yes, Karbala. Every day is Ashura. This is a real slogan. And this is what it looks like. So us as Muslims have to recognize that our strength is that even within all the differences that exist, whether it's the different foods or clothes or culture, the different languages, اختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم, the differences in your languages and your cultures, we have to learn that all of that is a strength when that is not the point. When we're able to have that and not focus on that, then we have a strength. Then we have a strength. Because what does it mean? It means that every person that connects to us becomes a part of that larger body. And it's irrelevant where they're from. It's irrelevant which language they speak. If, as Malcolm X said, Islam is the solution, then we, the practitioners of Islam, must go and become the solution for the ills in society. Well, you waiting for Trudeau to do that for you? My boy's dancing in blackface. For Aladdin 2, he's auditioning. Are you waiting for number 45 to do that? Come on, that's a bigger joke. No, let's be serious. If we're not going to do it, then who's going to do it? If we're not going to care, then who's going to care? So there's two pieces. One is within our own community, we have to be connected. We have to have strength and brotherhood. We have to focus on our identity as Muslims first and foremost. Then our cohesive unit and those individuals who are ready have to be at the forefront of standing against any injustice wherever that is happening. We have to be the ones leading the movement when something like this happens. We, the Muslims, the collective body, standing firmly with those who are Mazloom. Sometimes people, they say that, it'd be great if, all the people who are Mazloom came to Islam. I mean, Islam is beautiful. Fastest growing religion in the world. Statistically speaking. Even despite all of the deficit narratives, despite all of the negative narratives about Islam and Muslims, still Islam is growing. Not usually because we as Muslim, the practitioners, are on the forefront of sharing Islam with people, but just the barakah of Islam itself, really. Some of us are, but I would say the majority of us are not. But that's not the point that I want to make. The point that I want to make is that, let's say hypothetically, just like all of these people, there's waves of people are coming to Islam. Let's say that the people who are Mazloom, especially, who have been victims of injustice, who have been stepped on by the oppressors for too long, and they see, Islam is beautiful. Islam has a solution. In Islam, people are treated fairly and justly. Do you know what would happen if they came to Islam right away? And they came to one of our masjid, well, let's see. Would they be treated as brothers? Would the red carpet be rolled out? Would their sense of identity as a Muslim be something that we're connecting to? Would they get stares? Would people treat them differently? When they went to the job, would they be looked down upon? When they went to get married, would they be disassociated with? So if we're not practicing Islam, we have nothing to invite anyone to. We need to clean up our homes and then invite people to them. We need to be prepared for that stuff, and it's a process. And yes, we see that there are issues in different areas. There's work that needs to be done. But that's okay. Are we in it for the long haul? Are we a one-hit wonder? We're going to say that, hey, remember back in 2020? Remember back in 20? We had a good run. We did a couple protests. We did a couple programs. And then we faded into the background. Waiting for another crisis, maybe? Or no? So where do we go from here? Where are we going? Allah is asking this question. Where are we going? Where are you going? This is the time to think about what things are going to look like moving forward. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie called Remember the Titans. And in this movie, the long story short is that there's this black coach who comes and he's going to be the head coach of a football team. The football team has just become integrated. Black students and white students are now, they have to play together. And I won't spoil it for you, but the point that I want to make is eventually they come together. But initially, they had a real difficult time coming together. And so there's a moment where the coach comes, they're fighting with each other or whatever, and the coach comes and says to them something along the lines of, you have anger? That's good. You're going to need that anger. You got aggression? You're going to need that too. And he's talking about taking those emotions and channeling them onto the football field to be a better football team. I want to say the same thing right now. Unless you are living under a rock, unless you are completely aloof and oblivious to what's going on in the world and you are living on another planet, then you can't be indifferent. You had emotions of anger, of feeling upset, of feeling distraught, of feeling hurt. Hopefully that empathy was there. You're hearing about what's going on in this problem and that's going on in the world. But what I want you to do is channel that energy. You're angry today, you're upset today, you're energized today. But where are you going to be in 3 months? Where are you going to be in 6 months? Let's ask ourselves, are we going to be more educated about the injustices? Are we going to be taking steps to make sure we address any biases that we may have ourselves? Are we going to take any steps to create a more cohesive Islamic community? Are we going to remain isolated where we're not connecting with other communities? We're not strengthening our bonds of brotherhood? Are we going to be indifferent when more injustice happens? So let's harness that strength and channel that into our actions in the future. Let's let that guide our sense of purpose moving forward. And if you watched any of the other, some of the other episodes, I talked about some of my own experiences with police brutality. As a black man in this country, and I want to, also emphasize that as bad as the situation is of police brutality and the racism that exists, from the boys in blue, it's not limited to that. I was asking the question from the audience, the last place that I spoke, that why haven't they heard me talk about this before? I wanted them to really think and contemplate that they've known me for years. I've been a speaker for years. Why didn't they know this about me? And one of the reasons is that this is like another day in the life of a black man. This is not, the exceptional case. I have too many stories about getting pulled over by the police to even name them all. At some point, when you're African American man in this country, it becomes something that you almost expect and anticipate. Not that you look forward to it, but you are always aware of the reality and the possibility. You just carry that weight on your shoulders every single day. When I walk out of my house, there's that ever-present reality staring me in the face. You are a black man. You might not return home. Take all of the time to show your hands in plain sight, to not to speak super polite, because there's no telling if this officer is having an off day. If his trigger finger is feeling itchy. So these are realities that are faced and not always talked about, but not because they're not there, because it's a burden that you learn from a young age as a black man to shoulder, to deal with in a lot of different spaces. And it's not limited to just the police. You learn that you'll be discriminated in the workplace, in other spaces, and you hope that because you're Muslim, that at least Islam is the one good and truth. But unfortunately, we find that there are people who are not practitioners of Islam in our masjids and these spaces, and who also harbor a colonialized mindset. It's almost as if, in a lot of communities, our immigrant brothers and sisters come from a culture which was indoctrinated with self-hate. The same indoctrination that African Americans have been put through for years. Slave masters, quote unquote, would hire clergy to come, or make one of the people from amongst them come and say that, Jesus wants you to listen to Massa. Stuff like this. Your skin is ugly. Your facial features. And indoctrinate in this way, and try to create a self-hate so that oppression could be easier. This is not a new tactic. And in places where the same kind of colonizing and imperialism existed, you see the remnants of that. You see all the people who are, from different ethnic backgrounds as Muslims feeling self-hate against the color of their own skin, mocking the family members that are darker than them, disassociating from anyone if they look less European. This internal self-hate has to be addressed. If you need whitening cream to feel good about yourself, and there's an internal self-hate, how can you be kind to your brother? How can you address the issues of racism with someone else? If you look in the mirror and think to yourself that you're not European enough, and that's a standard of beauty, that these superficial markers are aspirations and goals, then you've missed the boat of Islam completely. And a person in that mindset, they can't help anyone. They really can't. A person who's looking at themselves like that is looking at other people like that. This is the fi qulubihim maradun that we have to address. In their hearts is a sickness. This is a sickness that we have to address. So I don't want to go on too long. I'm going to halt here. If you have, we'll start the question and answer portion of the program. Any questions that you have, please use the links that are provided to send in your questions. I've already got some questions actually, and so I'll jump into answering some of these, and if there's more that come along the way, we'll get into those. Now I know with that, with social distancing, obviously I'm here and you're there, but let's all please say salawat upon Muhammad wa ali Muhammad together. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjil farajahum. Okay. Number one. So many Muslims, and especially Shia, focus a lot on Joan ibn Shabiway and Bilal. Can you speak about the importance of learning about other black figures such as Hajar, Prophet Musa, Prophet Sulaiman? Absolutely. Absolutely. I have to first say that, unfortunately, there's a deficit narrative about Joan, which is really unfortunate. You hear almost every Muharram someone recite this. Shahid Mutahari has a really good book where he talks about these distortions, like how people have misremembered people and events, especially as they in regards to Karbala. And what people are remembering about Joan are these weak narrations of he was a smelly person and then he became Shaheed and, smelled good. There's no reason for this to be accurate. We don't have any proof that this is accurate. There's a whole article called racial othering that one professor wrote, Sister Amina, and she talks about this issue. She also talks about some of the imams and their wives who were from what I guess now obviously different makeup of countries, but known as Africa, or from different parts of Africa. But the point that I want to focus on is why this deficit narrative could become something normal, could become something acceptable, could become something that we don't even second guess. We don't even think to ourselves about, this. So someone who has spent their time as a freed slave and becomes what we aspire to be, a servant of the Ahl al-Bayt, a servant of Islam, and he serves Imam Ali, and he serves during the time of Imam Ali, he serves Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, he serves Imam Husayn alayhi salam, he becomes a shaheed of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Someone with this caliber of a human being that he was, this degree of servitude, that even despite being able to go and do anything, he chose to spend his life serving the Ahl al-Bayt, what we all should aspire to do. Yet how is it that some people remember these faulty facts? Right? This deficit thinking. No, assumptions of, yes, if you're black or dark or your skin, it must be something bad. It must be something foul. And perpetuating that stigma. So it's helpful to understand that despite that, while there were these important figures, that there were many other important figures. I mean, think about Imam Jawad, peace be upon him. It says that Imam Rida alayhi salam, that this was a time that was a real test for believers, because he didn't have a son for so long, and they were not sure and concerned, what's going to happen. Going to be different firqas and different groups that are they're not supposed to be 12 imams, some of the traditions that they had heard. Obviously, the imam is patient, Imam Rida is patient, but after Imam Jawad, peace be upon him, is born, there's a need, there's a mention of people who know and understand lineage that can tell that this person is, a child of this person. Because Imam Jawad was darker, his hair was curlier, then maybe some people were thinking of this might not be even the child of the imam. Maybe that was a reason for this person to come and to kind of confirm this. But irrespective of some people get really caught up in what color someone was in history. And it shouldn't be important. But it also shouldn't be a problem for someone if their imam had darker skin. Should they feel like my imam is not worthy? Should they look at their imam with this kind of deficit thinking? Yes, knowing that, one of the things that sometimes happens is when people mention that, this imam or that imam may have been this complexion, someone else will come out of the woodwork and say, no, they were definitely not that complexion. They were probably like this. And I don't want to get caught in that focus, but just be prepared that more important than that narrative, that discussion or that debate, more important than that is that I can't have any kind of animosity in my heart towards someone because of the complexion of their skin, because of their facial features. Is it possible that I could be rejecting my leader because of this? So that's an important thing to realize, is that we have to fix that sickness in our hearts. Many Arabs use language that describes good as white and black to describe bad, to raise awareness about BLM movement and spread the word of justice, especially within the Muslim communities. Sorry, there's so many questions. This got a little confused. Okay, many Arabs use language that describes good as white and black to describe bad, such as white heart or black heart. What is the recommendation to help people who don't see how wrong this is understand these words are harmful? Well, I think about what is the job of our centers? What is the job of our masajid? And I'm going to go a little bit faster because I want to make sure I get through all the questions. But when I think about that and think about the purpose of a center, a woman would walk into the masjid and say, Ya Rasulullah, I want to get married. Rasulullah looks at the people who are there, some of those mu'mineen who are there, who will marry this woman? One of them says, I'll marry that woman. Bismillah. Can do the nikah, marry this woman, go on. Now, maybe things are not that simple, in this time, but the idea that the masjid is a place where people can come for many needs, especially Islamic centers that we have, that may not even be from a fiqhi standpoint considered technically masjids, but still serve the purpose of connecting our people and helping our Muslims in our community. One of the things that they should be doing, that all centers should be doing, to have people coming from another land, that their English is not their first language, they should be learning the language and the culture of the society. It's very, very important. I cannot even fathom going to Iran, living there for over a decade, and not immersing myself in the language and the culture to understand the people. And that in and of itself is going to help to remove some of these misunderstandings, some of these things that were, some people say maybe it's just a part of the language. Language is also a reflection of culture, though. And more importantly, we have to just understand the context of things, what that means. So even if this word is used in this way in Arabic, if I'm talking to someone here in America, understanding the context of society, or even I would argue that in the modern day world overall, I need to be sensitive to these cultural nuances. I need to be sensitive to how this language may sound to someone else, how it may be perceived. If I don't know, then maybe I don't do that. So we have a responsibility to educate in terms of language. Why are there not English programs? I'm saying learning English. Programs where people learn English. Utilize our centers. I think it's the most ridiculous idea that people are paying rent for a building that they use for for the night of for Thursday nights. Maybe they do Jummah. Maybe they do something on the weekend. For 2-3 nights out of the week, would you pay mortgage on a home that you stay at for 2-3 nights? Our centers must become hubs that answer the needs of the people. Right now, we need people to understand the land that they came to live in. It's a whole nother topic if it was okay for them to come, with ta'arrub ba'd al-hijra. And the idea of a person, if they travel to a non-Muslim land, and they lose their faith or they lose their religion, that's one of the grave sins, one of the great sins. Traveling to a non-Muslim land, if you're going to end up not being able to practice your Islam or your children, then that's one of the grave sins. So for some people, their presence here is absolutely questionable or utterly problematic. So that's one issue. But for people who are here, it's a responsibility to make sure that people learn the language. Use our centers for this purpose. Everything doesn't have to be Thursday night or on Juma or one day on the weekend or something like that. We can use other days or whenever it's convenient. But bring people and let's educate them. Help them to understand what's wrong with this language that they didn't understand. We have to have this as an ongoing conversation. 3. What are some things that non-black Muslims do that is harmful to our black brothers and sisters that we don't even realize we're doing? I don't know what things are not being realized necessarily. Now, sometimes through virtue of dialogue, we learn that, oh, I didn't realize this thing. Some of the things that I hear oftentimes are things related to language, things that people think are culturally are normal or appropriate in terms of how they treat someone. But what I would encourage people to do is to use a measuring stick against themselves. Let's look at what Islam says, and let's look and see if we're doing anything different than that. If Islam says that there's no preference in color, if you treat someone any different because of their color, their complexion, their features, then you are doing something that's harmful. Harmful to yourself, to the community, to the other person. You're doing things that only our companions of shaitan should be doing. Okay? I think we have to be more self-critical. I think we have to get away from accepting that the idea of white supremacy, accepting these ideas about skin color. Those are some of the probably some of the most common things that people do. Although I don't know if people don't know that. I think that people know very well. When they come and say, you know, Sheikh, I'm looking for someone to marry, you say, okay, here's a good person. They say, oh no, they're a little bit too dark. Is there anyone whiter? I think they know exactly what they're doing. I don't think this is an accident. It's very much premeditated. But do people want to take a step back and see the ills of themselves? I think that it becomes very helpful for people who speak the same languages to have those conversations with people in their communities as well. It's one thing for me as an African American or as a scholar. It's another thing as a scholar when you're speaking about this issue of racial injustice, that this is haram against Islam. But it has a lot of value if in the Lebanese community, a Lebanese alim is coming and saying, oh community, the next time you marry your daughters and sons, don't discriminate against good candidates because their skin is darker. It takes some leadership in the community to really say this, to understand this and to share this. It takes people from, for example, someone who's Indo-Pak to go and say to people in the community, these are words that sometimes people use. They think it's funny. This is racist. Don't do this. It takes that, it's very valuable when people who speak the same language or understand that culture best are speaking to that audience and telling them these things. So we have to create those spaces where that can happen. As a student of Ahlul Bayt, how can we, as youth, use social media platform and public platforms to raise awareness about the BLM movement and spread the word of justice, especially within Muslim communities? You know, I want to make sure that I explain something. You know, there's Black Lives Matter as a principle. There's Black Lives Matter as an organization. Okay? Everything that every organization is doing right now in North America in the name of justice and social justice may or may not align with our Islamic values. Where it does, that's great. We support that. We support that focal point. But there may be areas where we're not on the same page. The principle and the general idea that Black Lives Matter, that's something that is a no-brainer. But specific to the organization, it's like any other organization. When we define what is justice and we define what is dhulm and what is oppression, we have to look at them from an Islamic lens. What is dhulm in Allah's eyes? What is justice in Allah's eyes? Not necessarily what is justice from the standards of this society. Some things we may see the same. But there are certain things in this society that people consider a type of oppression, and we definitely don't. Someone wants to run around butt naked. They will say that this is an oppression, that you're making me put too much clothes on. Well, we will say that that is not a problem. So we want to make sure that when we're talking about oppression and justice, we're talking about it from an Islamic perspective. That's number one. And as far as raising awareness and using our platform, we do whatever we can. Social media, I think, in this day and age is very important, but it should not end on social media. I mean, don't think that, a person, they go and they click, post, hashtag BLM, whatever. I've done my duty to the world. I can go back to my life now. No, let's not think like that either. So this is where I'm talking about what long-term goals are we doing. Let me throw out some ideas. Maybe that will help you. Our centers need to become more diversified. What are we doing to help that diversity? We need to stop focusing only on our culture. Let's diversify the food that we're serving at our centers, what we're eating, making sure that people from other cultures, not tokenism, I have a black friend, tokenism, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how do we integrate with other cultures and other parts of society, especially other Muslims. If I'm the only black Muslim then this is a problem, right? We need to be connected to the society, to the community. This is how we're going to understand the answer to a lot of these questions, right? We have to just be connected. We have to be open to those connections. We have to create those invitations. We have to collaborate and do work with other communities. Our boards of our centers, they have to become more diverse. It can't be the same handful of people who are always the board members all the time. We have to diversify those things. The speakers at our centers, throughout the year, throughout the different occasions, they have to be different people. They have to be different perspectives. The visuals. When we walk into our community, to our centers, to our homes, do we see images that are reflective of the beauty of Islam, the diversity of Islam? Do we see different leaders? Or do we only see images of, when you walk into some churches, you see, the image of Jesus that looks like maybe he was a 70s hippie rock star or something. Some white guy with long hair. Not even similar to what it says in the Bible Jesus looked like, where it mentions that his hair was kinky or wool-like. But do we create this image? Some of the images of some of the imams that you see, like the ones that look like they are, very Aryan, quote unquote, I guess. These are often really problematic. Why are these the only acceptable images? Or should there even be those images? What kind of language is in our centers? Is there even, do we have English around on the walls? The same way that we put Arabic, which is important, but we also have to put different other things. How do we create atmosphere that's welcoming? What about the textbooks that we're using? Are we teaching about Muslims in America? Muslims who lived here, who grew up here? Are we connecting to that struggle? Are we learning who Malcolm X is? What was that struggle look like for someone who came and converted to Islam? What did that journey of progress look like? What about the books that our kids are using? When we go through these different books, there's this I'm talking about our Sunday school, but right now I want to give an example from an actual book that exists. I don't remember, what school was using it, but one of these elementary textbooks, and it has emotions. Sad, angry, I don't know, something else. All of those are pictures that look like little black children. Happy, little white girl. What kind of message does that send? We don't even think about these things sometimes. There's, we hand out artwork for children to color. Or there's pictures or textbooks in our Sunday schools with images. Do any of them look like different people? Or any of them, do they have dark complexions as well? Or are they all the same, light and olive, and that's about all we can handle? Right? We have to look at our community and find a plethora of ways to change it. And the same look, I'm talking about, look at our family, look at our house and our homes. More importantly, look at our relationships. Are we getting to know, are we building ukhuwah and brotherhood with a diverse group of people or not? Next question. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Thank you very much for presenting such a refreshing perspective on the matter. My question pertains to our mosque in general. What are some ways in which our mosque, a Lebanese Shia mosque, can increase inclusivity in its programming? I think I mentioned some of them. What are some ways, in your opinion, in which we can create a more comfortable environment for people from other ethnic groups? So I mentioned some of them. I'll just share some experiences that people have had that come to the centers and basically get turned off from predominantly immigrant centers and end up never, going back, or feeling kind of isolated in their Islam as Muslims. One of those things is language use. For most people, at least American, they don't speak a second language. English is their language. And especially, we have to think about, that for African Americans brought here, some of them brought here as Muslims, they were denied any access to education, to their own culture, to their own languages, to the point where after several generations, and that gets beat out of you systemically, then there's nothing left in terms of, your language or your culture that you brought with you. So what people speak is English. That's their language. And not just the language, but also the colloquialisms and the pop culture and everything that's a part of, this society. Having that to be present and people to be able to connect to that, that's going to make you feel welcome, right? If I walk into a center and, people only are speaking Chinese and I don't understand or speak any Chinese, then, I might be there for a while, but after a while it might get tiring. It might get hard to be present there. It might be lonely to be in, such a space. I remember when I was younger, we used to go to a center. Um, we used to drive a little ways and go to a particular Islamic center. And we lived in Philadelphia. We were driving, going to this other center, especially for Muharram. And one of the ladies there asked my mom, "Why do you guys come here? You know, it's like we don't do things in English. You know, we are not even really friendly. Why are you coming here?" You know, and you know that was it was an interesting question posed, but you know, kind of rude maybe all at the same time. Um, my mom's focus was, we're here for Imam Hussein. We're here because of Karbala. You know, we're here because of, you know, a little bit of, you know, connection with other Muslims. So it's really, really unfortunate in such a setting where, you know, someone's trying to really go out of their way to connect with Islam and other Muslims, where Muslims are, you know, dismissive and not welcoming and are suspicious and asking you, like, not understanding why you would come there, because they would never go to listen to a program in another language. Like, that's so strange to this person who was asking, you know? And so it becomes a responsibility. I'd like to encourage that every center have a welcoming team, a welcoming committee. I think that there should be a culture of welcoming, what that looks like, that everyone in the community should learn, but there should be a welcoming committee at all times. If one time someone walks into the center that they haven't been there before, they should feel like, man, I'm at home and I love to come back here. Change the way we do things. Change the foods that we're serving. We don't have to have hummus with everything. Come on, we can switch it up. We can have, you know, switch it up. You make some fried chicken, some pizza, you know, mix it up with something, and that in and of itself is a way of welcoming people. It changes even ourselves and how we are able to embrace and do things differently. But the people, that's the most important thing. The people, do they treat you like that you're a brother? And really, I'm not at all talking about, you know, tokenism. I'm really, 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 really not talking about that. I'm not talking about, oh, the one black person came into our masjid, so now we go above and beyond to make sure that, you know, brother, 10 people offer you water, or 10 people offer you tea, and then and no one really truly knows you. No one truly shares about themselves. No one bothers to translate something that, you know, might have been misunderstood. Take time. Think that this is my brother in Islam. These are my sisters in Islam. And welcome people in that way. That's what's going to create a space where, you know, everyone feels welcome. And this isn't unique to, you know, one Lebanese mosque or center in North America. This is a problem in the vast majority of immigrant centers. And it doesn't have to be. I mean, as a scholar, sometimes you get the treatment, you know, that's the same. It doesn't really matter, you know. If I go to a center sometimes just in my regular clothes, if I'm wearing my hoodie and I just step up into the masjid, you know, somebody might feel the need to tell me, you know, about Islam and let me know that this is how you should make wudu, this is what you should do, and so on and so forth. Why? Deficit thinking. This person can't know. They probably don't know anything. I mean, I'll probably just smile and say thank you, alhamdulillah. I would hope that that's what I would do anyway. But a lot of people, they get, you know, annoyed by this and bothered. And, you know, when you don't feel welcome, you're not going to go back to those kind of places. Why? Why would you? And if there's an issue where a lot of times there's a lot of blame put on elders holding back the community or having this kind of thinking, and I don't want to let elders off the hook Allah can say that that's not the case, that's ever happening. But, with being patient and kind to our parents especially, we have to be able to have uncomfortable conversations, encourage them to have conversations with others, and be okay with talking about race, talking about color, talking about the kind of things that they grew up with, and back home, what kind of things that they were taught. These kind of some people come from this casteism, where there's kind of like a caste system of how people are treated, and which group of people are better than the next group of people, and so on and so forth. Talk about these things. How did we get to this place? How are we going to make sure that we ignore these things? I very much encourage interracial marriage. Being aware and understanding the culture of others first and foremost, but then being welcoming. If that's a good person, then it's a good person. We should take that opportunity, and that's a way that communities, will grow. It's one of the important ways. So it looks like that's all of the questions. Waiting. Any other questions coming? Give it a couple seconds. Any other thoughts and comments? Please feel welcome to share. Otherwise, we'll slowly bring this discussion to a close. I really applaud the Al-Huda Center Youth Group for taking this initiative, for striving for making this important front and center to discuss, to address these issues, to talk about them. I really feel that, if the things that were discussed are implemented, are taken to heart, are put into practice, then we will be solving the issue of racism on a bigger scale. Because I can't stress to you enough, if the people who are madhloom in this society, if we begin to share with them the beauty of Islam, and not just the theory of the beauty of Islam, but the actual beauty of Islam because of how we are, how we carry ourselves, how we treat others, waves and waves, afwaj, waves and waves of people, and drones people will be coming, and droves people will be coming to Islam. And we have to have something to welcome them with. We start with welcoming the people who are already in our community. Don't think about your community as the Shia Lebanese Center in, here in this one city, for example. Think about the community as the Muslim community in the world, the Muslim community in North America, the Shia Muslim community in all of North America. Think about it with this bigger lens and start to see all of these things. If you see a problem at another center that's not your quote-unquote center, then you see a problem in your community. That's what you should see. If you see a solution happening, you see a solution happening in your community as well. Because we have to see these things interconnected. Don't see them as isolated. Stay connected to other youth groups especially. Stay connected to the ulama and the scholars. I am at your service in any way that I can be. And let that be a continued conversation and continued theme. Last thing that I'll emphasize is that when we want to learn and look to our leaders, one of the important qualities of our leaders is not just their knowledge and their ilm and ma'rifah, not just that, and their taqwa and their piety, their God consciousness, their God wariness, but also their awareness of society, their cultural awareness of society. Because even if a person has great knowledge, but they don't understand the nuances of the culture or what's going on in society, then they're not going to be able to be that beneficial. Stay connected to such scholars. Stay connected to such ulama. Ask them questions continually. Seek their advice continually. When you're going about implementing some of these ideas, you're going to run into some issues. Seek back to these scholars who have these qualifications and tell them, hey, we ran into this issue. What do you advise? What do you think about this? Keep that connection alive so that our growth is continuous, and with leadership, that's the way that we are going to prepare ourselves for the 12th Imam, Imam Mahdi, Ajjalullah Ta'ala, Farajahum al-Sharif. It looks like we don't have any more questions. So at this time, I'd like to close with Dua Faraj. And keeping in mind that, there's a hadith that says there will be some people who claim that they are the companions and the near ones, the relatives of the Imam, but they will fight against the Imam. And then there are some other people who they're not even monotheists, but they will join the ranks of the Imam. So there may be some tables that are turned. We hope and pray that, by Allah's grace, by His mercy, that we're on that side that is with the Imam, that we're on that side that is the helpers and supporters of justice, that we're on the side that stands firmly against the oppressors and injustices. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma kulli waliyaka al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وجل فرجهم. Jazakumullah. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you all the organizers especially. Please make dua for all of those organizers, for all those who put in hard work to make this program possible. Let's pray for their well-being, inshallah. May Allah increase your tawfiqat and bless you in this life and in the next, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum.